What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the Crimson Demon Extreme Difficulty. In this video we'll cover the basic strategy and flow of the fight, the best units to take with you, and some strong and weak comps. So with that, let's jump right into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to cover is the flow of the fight and the things you need to know about the Crimson Demon. But as always, if you're interested in a particular part of this video, you can always jump ahead using the links in the description below. So now we'll take a look at the Crimson Demon Extreme Fight Summary and Flow. The fight's going to be broken up into 3 phases. Each phase gets progressively more difficult, and there's more things you have to keep track of and worry about until you get to the end and you kill them and get your sweet loot. So phase 1 is going to be pretty straightforward. The demon's going to be damaging you and periodically applying this debuff that is a block healing card debuff. Now, it's important to realize I said block healing card, not block recovery debuff. You can still be healed, you just can't play healing cards. You can be healed through something like passive healing from Red Liz's passive skill. You can be healed through lifesteal. You can have regeneration and other effects like that. You just can't play healing cards if you have them in your hand. If you're having survivability issues in the fight, we're going to talk about a couple things that can help you stay alive through the fight when we get into our character selection and team comps part of the video. Phase 2 is going to be largely the same as Phase 1 with increased attack and HP and defense on the boss. He's still going to be periodically applying the block heal card debuff. In addition, the Phase 2 boss is going to have an AoE lifesteal attack that can be pretty annoying if you're not able to take him down in 1 or 2 turns. So if you do have a character that can block healing and you're having trouble taking him down, the block healing might help you just eke out that last bit of damage and block his healing to move on to Phase 3. Of course, the best strategy is just to kill his whole heart in 1 turn so that you don't have to worry about his lifesteal and just move on to Phase 3 that way. So Phase 3 of the fight is going to have the boss's highest level of attack, defense, and HP, and on top of that, the boss is going to be able to put a buff on himself that's going to significantly increase his defense. So Phase 3 is going to be the phase you're going to want to get through as quickly as possible. In addition to having high attack, defense, and HP, the Phase 3 boss is also going to use his brand ability on your teammates at random, which means if nobody's branded, he's going to add the brand debuff to one of your teammates, he's going to remove all the buffs on it, and then the next turn he's going to hit them really hard. So obviously we're going to want to avoid this, and really the only way to avoid it is by killing the boss as quickly as possible. This is not something that can be debuffed or removed. And finally, the Phase 3 kicker is the boss's Malice buff. This is a stacking buff that stacks every single time the boss takes a hit. It's going to stack 2% increased attack and 2% increased defense. So obviously if you're hitting him 6 times a turn, that's going to stack up really fast, and that's going to hit you really hard. So this is what we're trying to avoid stacking when we say we want to burst through Phase 3. This is the reason why. So a typical strategy is to save your ults for Phase 3 so you can get through it as quickly as possible with as few of these stacks on the boss as possible. If you're not able to burst through turn 3 in 1 or 2 turns, an alternate strategy is to use units that apply the Ignite debuff on the boss. The Ignite debuff is a stackable debuff that increases the damage the boss is going to take, and the idea is that your Ignite stacks will cancel out and nullify the boss's Malice defensive stacks, helping you get through the Phase 3 fight. In general, the boss is immune to things like stun, petrify, and freeze, so you're not going to be able to stun it and cheese it like you can on the red demon. Also, the boss takes increased damage from weak point damage increases and increased damage from demons. So you can think to yourself, are there any units that have weak point damage and also are a demon? Oh wow, there happens to be a banner of one right now. That would be Demon Meliodas. So basically they want you to pull for Demon Meliodas because he's awesome on the Crimson Demon fight. However, if you don't have Demon Meliodas or if you're not interested in acquiring him, the fight can still be done without him, and we're going to talk about some different units that can help you out to do that. So now we're going to talk about some units that are the best damage dealing units against the Crimson Demon on extreme mode. Obviously the best that we already mentioned is Demon Meliodas. If you have him, take him, no questions asked. The next best tier would be something like a Bon, this is the red Nunchuk Adventurer Bon. Bon has weak point damage on his skill 1. He also has pretty decent multipliers on his other skills, and of course being red he's going to have the type advantage. Now a lot of you might be surprised to see SR Vivian on the really good tier in this list, and I probably need to explain why she's there. If you have a super strong team who can get through all the phases, no problem. If you can get through phase 3 in 1 or 2 turns, SR Vivian is not really going to help you. What she will help is if you are struggling to get through phase 3, Vivian can help you stack Ignite stacks on the boss, which is going to increase damage taken and counteract the boss's stacking defense buff. She has the Ignite on her skill 1. Each Ignite stack is going to last for 3 turns from Vivian, and it's going to increase damage taken by 10% on the boss. So that'll nullify basically about 5 stacks of the boss's defense buff. So if you're having difficulty through phase 3, you might be able to throw in an Ignite unit just to get you through. She also has decent multipliers on her ult, and because she's an SR unit, she'll be much easier to skill up to maximum ult than some of these other options. That being said, if you're not having any difficulties with phase 3, she's probably not a unit that you're going to use for a lot of other things in the game, so if you can get through phase 3 without her, it may be easier to just use some of these other units that have higher burst damage potential. Moving down to the good list, we've got SR Lizhawk, Green Jericho, and Red SSR Arthur. Lizhawk is a great unit for this fight. She has the type advantage, she does decent damage. Her passive probably is not going to stack that many turns because you don't want this fight to really last that many turns, but she's overall a pretty solid unit. Green Jericho, obviously being crit based, there's a little bit of RNG involved. If you're using a buffer like Green Helper, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can mitigate a little bit of that RNG disadvantage, and her crits can do crazy damage. So if you can crit with her consistently, she's really good to use. She doesn't have the type advantage, but she doesn't have the type disadvantage, so she's kind of neutral from that aspect. If you have her, and you don't have anything better, take her, you absolutely will not be disappointed. Red SSR Arthur is a little bit of a mixed bag compared to some of those other good burst options. Clearly his damage is not going to be as high as some of the others. His ult is pretty good with a good crit chance, but his non-ult damage is really not that good. One of the reasons he's on this list is because of his cross potential as a buffer. He's going to be able to increase basic stats by up to 30% and grant debuff immunity. Now the debuff immunity is important if you're having trouble surviving and you want to use a healer. If you have debuff immunity, that means the boss's block heal card debuff cannot be applied to your units, meaning that you can heal anytime you want. Now this may sound awesome and you could think you can just go in here and heal all day. That's true, but it doesn't stop the other issues we talked about in terms of the need to get through these phases pretty quickly, particularly phase 3. So if you're having big survivability issues and this helps you get to phase 3, you can certainly try it out. Again, you've still got the issue with phase 3, needing to get there very fast, and taking a healer with you is not always the best choice because that means you're going to be doing less damage. Red Helbram can be used in a pinch. He's alright, not much to say here. When it comes to buffers, you're going to want to use at least one. There's really not that many options to choose from. Gil Thunder and Helbram are obviously at the top of the list. Helbram is better if you're using a crit-based hero. Gil Thunder is not bad as well. He can do a little bit better damage than Green Helbram. So, personal preference. Some comps will use both. Lots of comps will use one if you're having survivability issues. Again, SSR Red Arthur is on here as really good because he can also pull double duty, dealing some damage with his ult, but in terms of buff potential, he's not going to be as good as the Green Gil Thunder or the Green Helbram. When it comes to support units, obviously Gother is going to be on top, but that doesn't always mean the number you want to take is 2. Usually the number you want to take is the number you have available. So if that's only 1, see what I did there? It's funny because you thought I was going to say, don't take him. Alright, enough of that. If you have 2 Gothers, take 2 Gothers. Merlin is pretty good for survivability. If you're having survivability issues, you can throw in a Merlin. She can pull double duty as damage a little bit. If you don't have access to Green Merlin, but you do have a Green Elizabeth or a Green SSR Liz Healer, those are pretty decent options as well. Again, we're still going to run into this issue on Phase 3, where if you're bringing more healers and less damage dealers, you're going to struggle with Phase 3. We've talked about a couple ways to mitigate that, but please keep that in mind when balancing survivability with damage potential. This fight is a little bit more difficult than their fights, so you really need to balance what units you're taking accordingly. So when it comes to subunits, the story is pretty much the same. You're going to want to focus on things that increase your damage. So the best is going to be SR Kane. He's going to increase attack-related stats by 10%. That doesn't just mean 10% attack, it's also 10% crit chance, 10% crit damage, so it's pretty good overall. Golgius is an okay second choice, same idea as Kane, not quite as good. When you get down into these bottom 3, these are no longer attack-based or damage-based subs. These are all survivability-based subs. So again, it's okay to take these, but it may mean you're going to struggle with damage, particularly when you get to Phase 3. Arthur's pretty good because he increases HP-related stats, helping with your survivability. He also adds lifesteal, which is usable even through the block heal card debuff. SSR Red Liz Healer is also a pretty good option if you're having survivability issues, because she provides a passive heal that can go through the block heal card debuff. And Ruin is good because he just reduces damage taken. So overall, you're going to have to balance damage dealing with damage mitigation. Alright, so you made it through most of the video. Now the last thing we're going to talk about is some example comps. Again, this will depend on what you have access to and what your partner has access to. Again, starting from the top, my personal favorite team and what I think is the most consistent and easiest team to play through, I'm going to rat out to that in a minute, but it would be this double buff team with 1 Gil Thunder, 1 Hellbrum, double Demon Meliodas, double Gother, double S Arcane, or 1 S Arcane, 1 Death Pierce to lower resistance on the boss. This team is pretty freaking good. I guess the requirement if you're running this team is that you need to be able to survive 1 or 2 hits from the boss without healing. The idea here is you want to try to one-shot the hearts if you can. Usually the strategy will be 1 turn of setup in the beginning, and then you want to do each subsequent turn killing 1 of the hearts. So that would be a 4-turn goal. Turn 1 is setup, turn 2 burst, turn 3 burst, turn 4 finish the 3rd heart and kill the boss. Obviously not everybody is going to have access to these units, and even if you do, if the gear isn't good enough and you find that you're dying a lot, you may want to switch out one or some of these buffers for some survivability or for some sustained characters, which we'll talk about next. So the very good tier team is typically going to have 1 buffer and 1 support survivability unit. You can clearly see there's a typo here because the pair on the left has 2 Green Merlins. You do not want to take 2 Green Merlins. 1 Green Merlin is really good for the cube to help with survivability. You would not want to take 2. Instead of the second, you would want to use a buffer instead. So on this very good tier, again, we're still having either a red Demon Meliodas or other, top grade damage dealing units, at least 1 buffer. So if you're on this very good tier, again, you're trying to get through the fight as quickly as possible, particularly the phase 3, with the idea that the best defense is a good offense, and that the faster you get through the fight, the less damage you're going to take because the less turns that the boss gets to go and attack you. So again, you can look at the good and the less good tiers, and you can see that basically as you move down the page, we're using less of the best units and more of the less best units, I guess you could say. Again, it's just going to be a little bit more difficult, it's going to be a little bit more RNG dependent, be a little bit less consistent, but it's definitely doable. It may take you a couple tries, so if you're struggling, you may have to balance the wasted stamina against, running hard mode versus extreme mode. But once your gear gets up and you get good practice at it, you should be able to get through this fight with several different types of comps. Alright, so you made it through pretty much the whole video. There's no more explanation coming. The only thing left is some gameplay examples. I'm going to show you guys 3 clips. The first clip is going to be one of these awesome type teams with double buffers. It's going to look pretty easy because the gear is pretty good on these characters. The next one I'm going to show you is one from the very good category, and that would be a single buffer and a Green Merlin cube survivability team. And then the third clip I'm going to show you is a clip that demonstrates why you want to get through the phase 3 turn as quickly as possible. So I'm going to show you actually a failed run from when this demon first came out. We didn't really know what to do, so I'm going to show you. I happen to have a recording of that's a little embarrassing because obviously we get defeated, but I want you guys to see what can happen if you're not prepared for the phase 3, and if you don't stack your ults for the phase 3. This is what's going to happen. So let this third clip be a warning. You don't want this to happen to you. With that, if you want to jump to certain spots in the video, as always, you can use the links in the description down below. And thanks for stopping by. Hopefully this was helpful. There's not going to be any narration to these clips, so I'm just going to put some music on. I hope you guys enjoy.